Imagine that there is a place on Earth that can stop the whole world. Not figuratively. Not in a figurative sense, but literally. The place through which every fifth barrel of oil on the planet passes. A place that affects the price of fuel, the cost of food, and the stability of entire countries. And right now, this place is on the verge of closing. This is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman. But if it disappears from the global system, the world we are used to will also disappear. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why no one can stop it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to stay updated on new videos. What kind of strait is this? The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow sea passage that connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and further with the Indian Ocean. It is one of the most strategically important waterways in the world, and its importance cannot be overestimated. Its width at its narrowest point is about 34 kilometers. But what is more important is not so much its width as the general location and features of the shipping lanes that cross it. The passages for ships are limited, which creates a dense traffic flow. Just as mountains and rivers can separate countries and civilizations, the Strait of Hormuz plays the role of not just a physical barrier, but a point of intersection of vital economic interests. The Strait of Hormuz has become an important transportation artery since the opening of the Persian Gulf to international trade. Already in ancient times, caravans with valuable goods such as spices and oil passed through this strait. But its importance increased in the 20th century, with the development of oil production and refining in the region. In recent decades, the strait has become not only vital for oil supplies, but also a major hub for liquefied natural gas. This route is particularly important for Qatar, which is one of the world's largest exporters of liquefied natural gas. In 2021, for example, Qatar provided about 30% of the world's liquefied natural gas supplies. The situation with this resource in the Strait of Hormuz will play a key role in global energy markets in the future. Why it is important for the whole world. Oil is not just fuel for cars. This is the foundation of the entire global economy. Without oil, not only transportation will stop, but also many industries, ranging from electronics to chemical fertilizers. In a globalized world, many countries depend on uninterrupted supplies of oil and gas, especially those whose economies are focused on industrial production and energy. The transportation of energy through the Strait of Hormuz ensures the stability of supplies, which has global implications. Not everyone knows that in the event of disruptions in oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz, the global economy will face enormous difficulties. Asian economies such as China and India, which are the world's largest oil importers, are particularly vulnerable. In 2019, China imported more than 70% of its oil, and approximately 70% of this oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. If there are supply disruptions, China could face an economic downturn and rising fuel prices, making it difficult to produce goods for global markets. Why can't you just find an alternative? At first glance, one might think that there are many ways to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Indeed, other routes exist, but they cannot cover the entire volume of oil and gas supplies. For example, the pipeline project through Saudi Arabia, known as the East-West Pipeline, connects the oil of the Persian Gulf with the Red Sea, providing an alternative route for some oil volumes. However, experience has shown that this is not enough to cover all the needs of the global economy. Since the Strait of Hormuz is the only such narrow and strategically important route for transporting oil and gas from the region, its closure would cause serious problems for global supplies. In addition, most alternative routes, such as the one that passes through Saudi Arabia, are capable of carrying only a fraction of the volume of oil needed for the global economy. There are also other transportation routes, such as the route through the Suez Canal or through the Gulf of Aden, but they are too far away and cannot cover all the needs that the Strait of Hormuz provides. If it is closed, the remaining routes will be overloaded, and they will not have enough resources to maintain the stability of the global economy. History, this has already happened. The Strait of Hormuz has long been one of the most tense and strategically important areas on the planet. In the historical context, this is not the first time that world powers have found themselves in a situation where threats or real blockages of this path had serious consequences. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, when the parties actively attacked oil tankers passing through Hormuz, the entire region was under threat. This period was called the Tanker War. The military actions related to the attack on shipping routes have demonstrated how vulnerable such a strategic route as the Strait of Hormuz can be when the conflict affects the interests of world powers. In addition, in recent decades, Iran has repeatedly used the threat of closing the strait as a way to influence international politics and the economy. In 2011, Iran warned that it could close Hormuz if the West continued to impose sanctions on its economy. As a result, global markets reacted immediately to these threats, and oil prices increased dramatically, even in the absence of actual fighting. These events have clearly shown that the Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographical feature, but an important economic lever that plays a key role in global politics. What is happening now? Today, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz is becoming increasingly tense again. The reasons for this increase in tension are multifaceted, and they are related not only to the political situation, but also to geopolitical games, the interests of world powers, and regional conflicts. Every year, the sea lanes through the strait are becoming more dangerous for international shipping. It is noteworthy that Iran is strengthening its military capabilities in the region every year by installing missiles and drones that can attack any objects in the strait, including oil tankers. The situation has worsened in recent years. In 2019, several tankers were attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, and amid these incidents, insurance companies increased rates on ship insurance. This, in turn, significantly increased the cost of oil transportation, and on some routes, it became impossible to insure the vessel at all. For example, a shipping company engaged in transportation in this region reports a high level of risk for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. In such circumstances, even the single threat of closing the strait becomes an economic blow that reverberates on global markets. Security threats in the Strait of Hormuz have become persistent and persistent. In 2021, Iran even seized several ships, which only increased the fears of international organizations. Attacks on ships using drones or missiles can lead to a sudden escalation of the situation, which will cause an immediate reaction from world powers. In response to these threats, shipping companies are beginning to avoid this route, leading to increased supply costs and supply disruptions. The economy and global supply chain, which has already been under pressure amid the COVID-19 pandemic, once again faces the risk of complete collapse if this important route becomes completely dangerous for shipping. Why it affects you. Understanding how the Strait of Hormuz affects the global market helps us see how every global threat or conflict related to this region can affect ordinary people. When oil prices rise, it not only increases the cost of fuel. Expensive energy sources inevitably lead to higher prices for goods, because production costs, including shipping and production, directly depend on the cost of energy. Rising oil and gas prices also lead to higher prices for electronics, cars, food, and all goods that require transportation. Such changes have a particularly strong impact on developing countries, whose economies have not yet reached the level of independence from energy imports. For countries like India and China, the cost of oil is an indicator that directly affects their ability to meet the basic needs of their populations. China, for example, depends on oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz to support its huge industrial sector. Disruptions in the supply of oil or gas to this region lead to delays in the supply of components for production and products. This creates pricing effects that are felt not only in Asia, but also around the world. For each of us, such a threat means not only possible economic problems, but also instability that can affect our daily lives. For people in the United States or Europe, rising oil prices can mean not only higher fuel prices, but also higher prices for groceries and even basic utilities. Thus, the Strait of Hormuz is not only an important geopolitical point, but also the key to stability in every country on the planet. Why can't the US just solve the problem? Despite the power of the American Navy and significant military forces, the United States faces unique challenges in addressing the security issues of the Strait of Hormuz. One of the main factors is the narrowness of the strait itself and its strategic location. Unlike open sea lanes, where the fleet can operate more freely, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow space where maneuvering is difficult, and every mistake can lead to disastrous consequences. This makes any attempts by the United States to take control of the situation in the strait extremely difficult. In addition, Iran is actively using the tactics of an asymmetric war, which does not involve a direct clash with a stronger opponent, but is aimed at creating threat and instability. By using missiles and drones, Iran can literally paralyze shipping in the strait without resorting to a full-scale war. The American army can provide security in the open ocean, but in the limited waters of Hormuz, their efforts may be ineffective. It must be borne in mind that every time the strait becomes dangerous, the risks to the fleet increase, and the United States has to balance on the brink of conflict with Iran in order to avoid escalation that would affect its interests in the region. This strategic moment makes the Strait of Hormuz a unique zone of influence, where every step can lead to large-scale consequences. Iran, having the capabilities to create threats, uses this factor to dictate its terms in the international arena. This is especially important for countries whose interests are directly related to the safety of sea routes and the stability of oil prices. The paradox of Iran. It is impossible to understand Iran's strategy without taking into account the importance of the Strait of Hormuz for its own economy. Iran depends on this route no less than other oil-exporting countries, because its own oil also passes through the strait. Then a logical question arises. Why would Iran risk possible blocking of its own oil exports if the Strait of Hormuz is the only way out for its energy industry? The answer to this question lies in the complex geopolitics of the region. Iran uses the threat of control over Hormuz not only to protect its interests in the energy sector, but also as a way to increase political pressure. The closure of the strait, or even the threat of its closure, allows Iran to use this key point in world trade as a means of influencing international relations. In the case of sanctions and international pressure, Such actions become a way for Iran to demonstrate its strength and independence. In particular, this gives Iran the opportunity to influence the larger economies of the world using this important trade route. What happens if the strait is closed? Let's assume that at one point the Strait of Hormuz will indeed be closed. This can happen not only due to military actions or political decisions, but also due to increased security threats, such as drone or missile attacks. Everyone will feel the first consequences of such a scenario. For starters, oil prices will skyrocket. In the first few days, world markets will feel a jump because information about the closure of the strait will immediately affect prices. During the first few days, there will be a sharp reduction in oil supplies to the world's largest economies. This will particularly affect developing countries that depend on oil supplies along this route to supply their economies. Western countries, which also depend on stable supplies, will face rising prices for fuel and other resources, leading to inflation. In a week, global markets will start experiencing shortages of goods, as high transportation costs will make moving goods much more expensive and difficult. This shortage will affect both everyday goods and high-tech products. For example, cars, electronics, and medicines will all become more expensive. Countries that do not have their own energy sources will be forced to look for ways to obtain alternative supplies, which will also lead to higher prices. The process will escalate, and by the end of the month, a global economic crisis will set in. Production facilities will be hampered, and many factories, especially in Asia and Europe, will be hampered by rising energy costs and problems with the supply of raw materials. These economic crises could escalate into mass unemployment and social unrest if the situation is not resolved in the coming weeks. The main conclusion: the modern world is based not only on political alliances or trade agreements, but also on energy flows. No matter how hard we try to get away from dependence on oil, it remains a key element for the functioning of modern civilization. Energy, and especially oil, is the basis for the movement of industry, transportation, agriculture, and many other aspects of daily life. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographical feature, but a connecting artery of the global economy. If this strait were closed, its influence would spread to all corners of the planet. It is the second most important point on the planet that controls global oil flows. The first, of course, is oil production itself, and the Strait of Hormuz is a vital transit route, without which civilization risks facing catastrophic consequences. For countries that depend on oil supplies through the Hormuz, any change in its availability can lead to a global economic crisis. However, the strait itself is not just a point on the map. It is a strategic hub that connects the world's largest economies and countries, whose energy security depends on this narrow corridor. The final: if you ever hear news about instability in the Strait of Hormuz, geopolitical risks in Iran, or threats to close this strategic route, remember, this is not just about conflict between countries. This is not just a political crisis. We are talking about controlling one of the most important points of the global economy. When the Strait of Hormuz is threatened, the entire system that keeps our world afloat is at risk. And if this strait stops, everything will stop. The global economy will have to look for ways to recover, but it may take years. The world as we know it can change its structure.